Welcome to the Alberta Prosperity Project podcast. If you're ready to listen, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Thursday, June 30th, 2022. Welcome to episode 8 of the Alberta Prosperity Project podcast. I'm your host, Hunter, today, joined today with Tanner, who is up in Lloyd. Tanner, how's it going?
I am happy as anything because I am currently sipping on a Pepsi, which, well, it's one of my favorite pops. I quite enjoy it. I don't drink pop near as much as I used to.
Sure.
But I do love Pepsi. Granted, my absolute favorite pop of all time is uncontested, is A&W root beer. I think when it comes to tiering soft drinks, like a tier, like tiering it, A&W reigns supreme. A&W root beer cannot be beat. It is without a doubt the greatest soft drink ever created in the whole history of mankind. Cannot be beat. It cannot be beat. I just love it. And so I enjoy sipping once in a while on Pepsi or A&W root beer. But the reason I bring it up is because I think you have a different opinion, don't you?
I do. Different opinion on a few things that you said, actually. I mean, my top would probably be, a soda water or a flavored one, similar to,
it's a bit of a rough start, but that's
so
fine.
definitely a contrast there. And then after that, my favorite sodas would be, a Coke Zero or a Sprite. I think that Canada needs to move in the direction of using soda. It gives me more of a reminiscent feeling of going into...
Who says soda up here?
Oh,
where's that soda coming from?
That's the problem. That's where I think we need to move in that direction. I mean, I don't know. I find the term a lot more nostalgic, I think. I think that it, if you have, the soda shop, drinks there, I think that's the direction that we need to move. I would be...
It's a pop shop. It's a pop
fine
shop.
To go. I don't think so. I don't recall that.
Shop.
I don't know. I think that, if someone's describing something and you say, hey, give me a nice soda, it sounds a lot more refreshing than a pop. I mean, it just... I don't know. I think that that's the direction we need to go. So people can agree, people can disagree. I think that obviously our Canadian listeners will be disagreeing with me on that one, but that's fine. I am fine to go on that hill. I always would call it a soda water. I'd never say get me a pop water, and that is where my argument comes from.
Okay, that is a bold take.
You
might have merit. It might not. I'm not sure. That might be one to discuss and debate.
There you go.
Okay, how about this? Yep. Who's your hairstyle or mine? Which one do you like better? You kind of slick yours back. I kind of, for now, because I'm growing it out, or I'm trying to, it goes kind of to the sides a bit. So whose is better?
I would for sure say mine based on the amount of people that have said I'm the better looking brother and recognize that at events. I'd have to say it has to be my just luscious and wonderful hair. I'd have to say it might sound kind of selfish or conceited, but it's just the truth of the matter. I have to. I'm speaking the truth, and I think that's gonna help people in the episode. Is we're just speaking fact. That's it.
Okay. Well, again, I'm not sure that it's objective fact, but it's an opinion for sure. It's an opinion for sure. One last one is. What is your opinion of oysters, consuming oysters?
Oh, love them. Absolutely. If I could have them every single day, I absolutely would. It's refreshing, just amazing.
The same is true of escargot.
Oh, absolutely. That calamari, as you know, any seafood in me, shrimp, whatever it is, I will absolutely indulge myself in trying it. I'm game to try anything that comes before me. I love it. I mean, it's lovely.
Now, to me, as you know, it's the opposite. So the thought of consuming an oyster, a snail, squid, anything with that undesirable texture and consistency is unfathomable. It's unthinkable for me. I could not even comprehend trying to consume such a delicacy because it's for me, it's the texture. It just makes my body shiver. I don't like the texture. I don't like thinking about the texture of those certain delicacies. And what are you going to do? I mean, I know you'll say that your palate is more refined than mine. I think that's also very suspect. I know that you're going to say that, you broaden your horizons and your culinary enterprise and travel into these different food groups. But again, I think that's also very suspect. I don't know what to say, except I think that, I just simply can't enjoy oysters.
I don't know. Like you said, I do have the more refined palate. That's the key words that I had heard. Whether it's on steak or on seafood or sodas, whatever that case may be. But the nice part, I think, is that our leaders in this country, as you have read in previous news articles, are more than happy to support our ability to express this with each other. Is that correct?
I was reading an article. You're quite correct. And the article, I have it up now, says this. It's from Krista Freeland. And she said, Canada is extremely concerned by the arrests of women's rights activists. Okay. This is in Saudi Arabia. Sure. Then her spokesman, Adam Austin, said these concerns have been raised with the Saudi government. So Canada, the government of Canada, Chrystia Freeland and her entourage, raised the concern of the Saudi kingdom arresting women's protesters, women's peaceful protesters, with the Saudi government. And then he says, Canada will always stand up for the protection of human rights, including women's rights and freedom of expression around the world. That's the quote. And so that sounds all fine and dandy unless you are...
Well, Tamara Lich or any Canadian for that matter. Now it seems it's yeah. Unfortunately,
that's it. So on one hand, you have the government taking this resolute stand and snarling, at the lion. The Saudi Arabian government saying you're putting peaceful protesting women who are protesting for women's rights in jail, and that's appalling and it's cruel and it's criminal. And then they turn around and they arrest Tamara Lich again and again. And they arrest others for peacefully protesting and demonstrating in the streets legally. So it's like this Orwellian doublethink. This you say one thing, but you do the other, or do the exact opposite.
Yeah, and so obviously for those that have not heard the news yet, Tamara Lich was recently just arrested again in Medicine Hat, Alberta, and is likely to be transported here to Ottawa if she hasn't been already. And so I guess my question to start off with for you would be, what's the APP's stance on people being arrested for freedom of expression? It appears that seems to be what the original root cause of the arrest was for. And, since that's the case, why is it such a big deal to us at the APP?
Right. Oh, yeah, it's unthinkable to arrest a man or a woman who is exercising their constitutional right and duty to exercise free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression peacefully, et cetera, is something that's so tyrannical. That's it's unbelievable. That is the foundation of tyranny. That's if someone wrote a handbook about how to be tyrannical, that's on page 1, right? Eliminate the citizens' freedom of speech, eliminate their freedom of expression, eliminate their freedom to assemble. Where they want, when they want, how they want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's unbelievable. Yeah, there's no other way to put it.
Right, absolutely, and I think that obviously gives the hard stance that we do think that this is truly unthinkable. But my question would be to that, obviously you mentioned the tyranny aspect of it. Well, why is this arrest itself such a big deal? Like, why are we so concerned? Is there maybe something else that we're concerned about other than just the freedom of expression, or is that the main deal here?
Right. Well, if you go to that, like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. You can see why. You can see how it's so dangerous, why it's so dangerous. What am I holding?
And you're holding Pepsi with glass and used to be ice, but is now melted and diluted.
Right. So I'm holding a glass, crystal glass, with this intricate design on the bottom. And in the glass, I've poured Pepsi, and I also had some ice in there, and the ice is now gone. And I have, and you can see it, half a glass of Pepsi, and I can smell it if I want. I can taste it. I can consume it. And I can do all of these scientific experiments, so to say, and observations to conclude what I believe reality to actually be. And you said so yourself, that the glass is half full. I'm holding a glass to begin with, and it has Pepsi in it, right? That's the observation. But how did you tell me that that's what you thought reality was?
Had to say it to you.
Right, you spoke it. You spoke it. That's the point. You spoke it. You saw what reality was, or what you believed reality to be, and you spoke it. You communicated it to me through speech. And that's why the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of expression is so critical, because it's the medium by which we express our opinions, our thoughts, our beliefs about reality. That's why it's absolutely critical. So, what's the weather outside today in Red Deer?
It was sunny. It looks like the sun's coming back, but we had a bit of a thunderstorm and lightning for the last about hour here. So, but yeah, you bet.
Right. So you look outside and you use your senses to envision a picture, a description of what reality is. So you go outside, you smell, say, freshly fallen rain, right? That smell after a thunderstorm. And you see that the massive, what are they called? Cumulonimbus, right?
Remember I think so. Yeah, Sierras and all those ones. Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So they're moving away. They're moving away from your location. You can see the sun shining. There's dew on the grass. Your front porch is damp.
Right.
The soil is black, or more black than usual, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. and you look at all of these things, you take in the smells and you touch the grass and you feel the cold air, and in your mind is composed a description of reality. You go back inside the house or you go on a podcast and you tell me using speech exactly what you believe that reality to be. Right. I can do the same. I can look outside. It's overcast today. There's not a lot of sun. It's not raining because the ground outside is dry, and you can see that there are no raindrops on the rocks or on the wood or on the fire pit, whatever might have you. And then I tell you through speech that outside today it's overcast and it's just kind of a blah day, right? Nothing is too sunny, nothing's raining. It's just right in the middle. So I'm using speech to communicate what I believe to be true, what I believe to be reality, because you see, truth itself is just a description of reality as it actually is. There is an objective reality, and then there is our communication of it, our description of it. And you say, well, why is it important to be accurate? Right. So like, what did our government do with inflation? What did they tell you as a Canadian or as an Albertan when they were printing money?
Yeah, that it wasn't too bad, and it's only temporary. It's going to go away. Don't worry.
Right. So they were printing all this money. They told us inflation was temporary. Well, first they told us inflation wouldn't be a problem at all. Right. Then when it was a problem, they said it's temporary. Then they said it was short-lived, right? Transitory, not a big deal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now where are we?
In a large inflation bubble mess. That's the easy way to put it.
Now we're in trouble, right? Because government, there was reality, which was if you print more money, money will become less valuable and inflation will rise. That's reality. It's objective reality. Government communicated it falsely, wrongly, incorrectly, deceptively. And now what do we have? Well, the reality's come back. It's whacked us in the face and we have high inflation. And so the way that we disagree with government and publicly voice our concerns is by using speech. You and I and others can speak up and did speak up when government was printing all of that money, and we can say inflation is going to be an issue. Inflation is going to be an issue. The reality is inflation is going to be an issue. And that freedom allows us to communicate what we believe is actually real and actually exists. Now, this is critical, right? Because when you compose a belief about reality that actually approaches reality, you see what I mean? That when you compose a belief that actually corresponds to and is reality, well, then you suffer the least amount. How do I say it? Then you invoke the least amount of suffering for the human race as possible. So, what's a good example? Well, suppose that I took have I sent a podcast my vehicle? Would I drive?
I don't think so.
I don't know if I have. Well, I have Grandpa's old 1970 International pickup. It's red. It has a 3 on the tree. 1, 2, 3. It's very slow, slow. And it's a lot of fun. Granted, we were just going into town the other day, weren't we? This is a fun little aside. Yes. We were going into town, you and I, and what happened? You were in the passenger seat, and? You
bet. I see a radioactive looking green colored liquid coming out from the dash and onto my shoes, and I was starting to, I noticed my shoes getting wet, and I'm like, oh, that's definitely not rain. It was a sunny day. The windshield was starting to fog up, so that was kind of strange. It was a beautiful day. And
so we sprung a leak sprung a leak with antifreeze in the heater core. So anyways, it's a fun truck. You got to work on it a bit, maybe do some soldering, etc. But it's fun. Suppose that I believe that I can take that truck and drive it into the lake, and it'll drive on top of the lake, actually, on top of the water. What will happen if I do so?
Thing's a tank. It's going to sink pretty quick.
Oh, it's going to sink, and it's going to sink hard. Exactly. That's right. So I can believe one thing about reality that isn't true, right? Printing money won't cause inflation. My truck can drive on top of the water. But then when reality actually comes for it to collect its debt, well, then I'm going to get walloped in the face, and that truck will sink, and I will suffer. My bank account will suffer. My insurance rates will suffer. My ego will suffer, right? My ability to drive will be lost. And so that'll invoke suffering, etc. All because I didn't accept reality for what it actually was. Now, you might have been free to tell me using speech that I shouldn't do it. And here are the arguments why. Here are the physics of water. Here are the physics of a massive, hulking, heavy, old truck. Here are the physics of liquid and the physics of a solid, et cetera, et cetera. And if you were free to speak that to me, perhaps I would have relented. And I wouldn't have driven that truck into the water. But if you're handcuffed to speak, if you can't speak, well, then who's to stop me, right? Who's to tell me that I can't do what I am trying to do, which is drive the truck into the water? It's lost. And so that's why the freedom of speech is so critical, because at its heart, it is the first and most critical defense against tyranny, precisely because it's able to warn others about the tyranny before the tyranny actually exists, right?
Yeah.
Before the disregarding of reality actually becomes reality. And then by doing so, you might be able to avoid disaster.
Right, absolutely. And you've put a really nice emphasis there on why the APP is actually putting such a focus on this free speech. But before we get a little bit more into that, I just have a quick question. That is, why do you think that Tamara Lich herself was arrested for, speaking out in her freedom of expression when so many others are not being arrested at this moment? Was there something different about her messaging or about her speech, or what's kind of the reasoning you think behind the Crown arresting?
Yeah, no, she's an example, right? So she actively, again, by her actions and by the actions of others, speaking, expressing, demonstrating, peacefully protesting, etc., displayed her displeasure with the way that the government was running its country or the country. And she was acting as a proxy, as an ambassador for, again, countless millions of Canadians in Ottawa who also were expressed their severe displeasure with the Canadian government. And so by arresting her, what the Crown is able to do is basically say, and enforce that you are not free to speak when you want, and you're not free to speak what you want, even on public property, on property that you actually own, right? Because it was on public property on the streets,
right?
Because it's a danger to them, right? By speaking and by showing all of this, Tamara proved that people still have power in the country, that we're able to resist government in a peaceful and legal way, that they're not able to do everything that they want. And so it's a check and balance on their power, which those in power very rarely actually want. So,
right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess, now moving back to that main point, and that is why we're putting such a focus on this and this idea of free speech. Is there something else that limiting free speech might, not, even if it's not intended to, but actually ends up kicking the can down the road? And now we have a lot of other problems like we've seen with inflation where, is there something else maybe with this limiting of free speech you want to touch on?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So the reality is free speech is the same as property rights. They're the same thing. To have property rights is to have free speech. And, a little while ago, we did that video, that podcast on the weapons ban, right? Yep. And how if you have property and if you can defend that property, then it's a proof that you actually have that property because it's actually yours, right? The right to defense is a proof that what you have is actually yours. The same is true of free speech. They're actually one and the same. What I mean is we often talk about the right to free speech,
right?
Which is true, and the right to say certain things. What we don't talk about is where we're able to say those certain things, right? That's also what's critical.
Right.
What I mean to say is, if I actually own my property, and if it's actually mine, then I'm able to do what I want with it and on it. And that includes speaking what I want, where I want, how I want to speak, what I want to speak, and exactly how I'm going to speak it. So I can go into my own home and I can, to myself, let's say, discuss the pros and cons of, I don't know, steak, some random example. And I can do that because it's my property and it's my own and I own it and it's actually mine. And so I can do what I want with it.
Right.
But I can't go to the private library, stand on a table and begin a sermon on the evils or the benefits of, say treated wood, treated lumber.
Sure.
And discuss. I can't. Or maybe I could, but the point is that the owner of that property gets to decide because it's his or her property. It's theirs, right? And so they're able to, because it's their own, they're able to and have the right to control what goes on in that property, within that property. And that applies whether it's a private library, a home, a bedroom, a mind, right? My own body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we often hear the example, of a man shouting fire in a movie theater, right? And those who want to limit free speech say, well, you can't shout fire in a movie theater. So surely there have to be some restrictions on free speech in Canada or freedom of expression and so on and so on. But that's nonsense. It's a nonsensical argument. The reality is, suppose that you went into a movie theater. I know we just watched Top Gun. Boy, that was good, hey?
It was. I've only seen it 3 times so far. So
you've seen it 3. I've seen it once, but that last half hour was unbelievable. That was when I watched it first. That was edge of my seat. I was just losing my mind. Anyways, a lot of little sidetrack. But let's suppose I go to Top Gun.
Sure.
And for who knows what reason, because I'm an absolute madman, I decide to deprive others of watching the full show, and I shout fire. I stand up in the middle of the movie and I yell fire, 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 fire. right?
I'd stay in there. I'd stay.
Well, yeah, okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
I guess the movie is that good that, you know,
Yeah.
guys are just, it doesn't matter. I'm watching the whole thing. But suppose that, you know, people got up, they rushed out, and, it causes big kerfuffle. People will say, well, you can't do that, so you can limit the free speech. But again, that's nonsense.
Right.
What's actually happened is that I, in shouting fire, have lied on a man's private property or a woman's private property, the movie theater, which he or she owns. And I spoke what was false about said business. What I really did is I'm in violation of this implicit contract that I've signed, right?
Right.
If I go into, you know, a restaurant and I say they sell horse meat, and they actually don't, then by all means I should be charged because I'm defaming, I'm engaging in defamation of that business. The same is true with movie theater example. I'm lying about the theater. There was no fire. There is no fire. And so I have no right to yell fire without incurring legal consequence, and rightfully so. It's a lie. The same is also true if the owner does it, right? If the owner comes in and yells fire, fire, and there is no fire, well, then he's also breaking the contract that he had with us, which is to use that facility legally, right? He's lying. He's committing fraud for who knows what reason. He is lying about what's actually true in his business with regards to his business to the detriment and harm of others, right? So it would be like a restaurant saying that we sell Wagyu beef and it's not Wagyu, but they've told everyone it's Wagyu and they charge these prices, assuming that it's Wagyu. It's a lie, right? It's fraud. It's wrong. And so they should be charged accordingly. And so you see that free speech and property rights are one and the same. If I actually own my property, then I have a right to speak on that property and speak what I want because that property is actually mine and it's not owned by anyone else.
Right.
That means also that I can't go to every private place in the city and speak exactly what I want on those private premises, precisely because those private locations are not mine. And so I'm not free to do exactly what I want with it. You see what I mean? Now, Tamara and the convoy, we're on public streets, right? We own those streets.
Right.
It's like the right to peacefully protest is a right in the Constitution, and same with speech and so on, right? What I'm saying is that you can't argue that there should be limits on the freedom of speech. That's really the point, because well, when you take it out to its logical conclusion, you see that if you limit free speech, what you're really doing is you're limiting property. And if you eliminate free speech altogether, it's as though no one owns anything at all. If I can't speak what I want in places that I actually own, like even myself, my own mind, or in my home, well, then it's as though I don't own that property at all because I'm not free to do what I want with it. It's the same thing. And so it's why the socialist and socialism hates free speech, because it's a proof, it's a guarantee that property rights still exist and that the actual, the existence of property is still real and is still, is still real and it's still provable. But if you eliminate the free speech, then it's like you're eliminating property rights and property altogether.
No, that's exactly right. And I mean, that's obviously what we're fighting and advocating for at the APP, and that's why we're advocating for it. We talked, obviously, like you said, on the property rights episode that we did. If someone wants to go back and listen to that we mentioned this in a bit more detail. But like you were saying, it's that we then have the ability to speak reality. We have this ability to defend ourselves and our property using our speech and using this concept of reality. So before we close out the show, did you have any closing words that you wanted to add? Or are you happy with how that was?
No, that was good. It's really what it is. Is so much of the APP is about property rights. We want to prosper, we want freedom, we want independence, et cetera, et cetera. What it really means is, at its heart, I want to be able to do what I want with my property, so long as it doesn't harm another, right? We're not able to do that now because federal government takes all of this money from us, right? Through equalization or whatever other program you can think of. Right. They invade the home. They continually push this new welfare state that takes control of every aspect of society. They arrest peaceful protesters for peacefully protesting and for defending citizens of the country from tyranny, et cetera, et cetera. So that isn't a reality right now, but it needs to be one. So no, that's the point. That's the
Absolutely. Point. There we go. Well, if you want to join us on this fight for property rights and for gaining back our freedom of speech and the freedoms that we have lost, I encourage you to join the project today. You can do so by going to albertaprosperityproject.com and clicking join now. It's there that actually we are able to support the show, and your donation goes a long way in helping us do these events and educate just the masses of Albertans that are coming out. We've seen thousands join our project, and we're excited for the thousands more that are also going to come aboard. Speaking of which, event that's going to be happening coming up is the Stampede Pancake Breakfast, and that is going to be going on July 11th. So if you can make it out to that, we'd love to see you there. It's going to be a wonderful, huge event. Please do RSVP, though. It gives us an idea how many pancakes we're going to have to flip. Maybe we'll get Tanner up there flipping some pancakes. Who knows? I don't know if you'll want his, but we'll stick with that. And as well, if you do want to get involved or volunteer in any way, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out by going or emailing, contact@albertaprosperity.com. As well, you can reach out to Tanner or myself. We love hearing your feedback on the podcast. It's been great to hear from a number of individuals, and hopefully we'll keep hearing from you. So with that said, it was great doing the podcast with you again today, Tanner, and hopefully we will see everybody next week.
You bet. Thanks a bunch.
See ya.